Hey guys, in this video I have the Coolbaby RS-97 Retro Game Portable. It's a very capable handheld that can run custom firmware and costs about $50. So here's a really quick unboxing. Included with the device is the TV out composite cable as well as a mini USB cable for charging the device and a manual. It's basically like the original Dingoo A320 handheld that I had a few years ago. It looks a lot like the Revo K101 Plus, but the difference is that the K101 Plus was a hardware clone of the Game Boy Advance, while the RS-97 runs ROMs via emulation. And since it is emulation based, you have access to more features like save states that isn't possible on hardware emulation. I was a fan of both the K101 Plus and the Dingoo before I sold them. The RS-97 piqued my interest because of the possibility of running Open Dingus. I had some regrets of selling my Dingoo A320, and so I wanted to give the RS-97 a try. So to go over some of the specifications of the RS-97, it comes with a 3-inch LCD screen with a resolution of 320 by 480. It has an Engenic JZ4760 SoC capable of running up to 600 megahertz. It has 128 megabytes of RAM. It uses 2 microSD card slots for storage, one internally, which has the stock firmware, and then one externally. It uses a replaceable Nokia BL5B battery. This video will focus more on the RS-97 after it has custom firmware installed. The stock firmware doesn't perform very well, so it's definitely a must to have it updated to the latest version of custom firmware. I'll show you how to install the latest custom firmware 97 Next 1.71 at the time of this video to your retro game system. This method won't require you to open up the device. It will also leave the internal microSD storage running the stock firmware, and you basically make the custom firmware run off of the external microSD card. This way you can easily revert back to the default firmware by ejecting the external microSD card. It's also much easier to update to newer versions of the custom firmware in the future, since you won't have to open up the device every time. And links to everything I mentioned will be in the description. First thing you'll need is a 4GB microSD card at a minimum. It's recommended to have like 8 or 16 or more. For me, I'm just going to use an 8GB one since it's enough for me. But if you plan on having PlayStation 1 games, you'll probably need 16 or 32. Now we'll need to copy the external firmware loader onto the micro SD card temporarily. And what we're going to do is essentially just install it onto the RS-97. And what that will do is make it so that whenever you have an external microSD card, it will load the firmware from that. So copy these files onto the microSD card, and then we're going to stick it into the RS-97 and then run the install.dge file. Place the SD card into this cartridge adapter and then plug it into the RS-97. Then what you want to do is turn on the device by holding down the power button on the left hand side, and you want to scroll to the right and choose the file browser and hit A. And then from here what you want to do is go to the previous directory and then select SD card, and then click on the install.dge, click open, and this will install the necessary files to boot the image from the SD card adapter. And in the next step, we'll repurpose the microSD card and we're going to burn the custom firmware image onto it. And after installing the external firmware loader, we can repurpose the microSD card. So download the 97 Next custom firmware and unzip the package. So this is zipped with 7-zip. So go to the website if you don't already have it and install 7-zip, and this way you can extract the file, which is an image file, IMG file that you can burn using Etcher or Win32 disk imager. Just make sure you have the right drive selected for your microSD card. Select the IMG file that you just extracted, click write, and then click yes to confirm. And after writing the disk image, if you used a bigger microSD card, say an 8GB, we want to use this program to resize the partition so you have access to the full size of the microSD card for ROMs. And we're going to download this partition manager. It's a free one, and what you want to do is download that and install it. And after installing, you want to run the application And this is where we want to resize the ROMs partition. So there's a number of them already for this disk on the microSD card, and you want to find one that says ROMs FAT32, and we want to make use of this basically unallocated space. So choose extend, and then what you want to do is basically slide the this thing over to the right to maximize it, and then go OK. And then after that, you want to click apply. So as you can see, it's a lot bigger now, and click apply, yes. And this process should take a couple of minutes depending on the speed of your computer, but I'm going to fast forward through this part. After resizing the partition, what we're going to do is put the microSD card into your RS-97 card adapter to boot the custom firmware. If you take out the microSD card, it will basically boot the stock firmware. And then we're going to plug it up to your computer using a mini USB cable. So while holding down the B button, turn on the RS-97, and Windows should detect the partitions, and from there you can start copying your ROM files into the ROMs folder. And for organization, I create a different folder for each type of ROM. So there's a different folder for NES, SNES, and Game Boy Advance. This is the easiest way to install custom firmware without opening up your RetroGame RS-97. So I'll quickly go over the menus here. So you navigate the 4 menus with the left and right buttons on the top of your RS-97. And the first section I want to take a look at is the settings area, and this is where you can set things like the timeout for the screen and when it powers off, as well as various other options. So I'm just going to quickly go through these options here to show you what you can change. And there's also the backlight and the global volume. And if you hit B, we'll go to the skin, and I have the oxygen skin enabled, but there's a number of skins already installed. And I think the default one that is chosen is Deck UI. And next is wallpaper, and you can unmount the external SD. And that's pretty much it for the settings. And the first section is the app section. You click the right button again, and this is where you'll find the emulators. So I'm just going to quickly scroll through these emulators to show you what is already installed. But all the popular emulators are already there. And then the next section, the final section, is the games. So there's a number of games that are like homebrew games that are installed. So now let's go through a few demos of some of the newer emulators that are installed in this version of the firmware. They run a lot better than the stock one. So this is Giga Wing, which is a CPS2 game, and it's running Final Burn Alpha. It runs pretty well, and a lot of the CPS1, CPS2, and Neo Geo games, they work pretty well using the Final Burn Alpha emulator. This is Iridion for the Game Boy Advance using the GPSP emulator. NES emulation works perfectly using the FCEUX emulator, and right here I'm playing Mega Man 2, one of my favorite side-scrolling games. Sega Genesis emulation is also pretty good using PicoDrive, and here I'm playing Altered Beast. The Super Nintendo emulation isn't perfect, but it's definitely playable. As you can see, the frame rate kind of drops below 60 frames per second when you're playing it. The RS-97 is a decent portable for emulation, but it's not perfect. There is a bit of slowdown on the Game Boy Advance as well as Super Nintendo emulators. PlayStation 1 emulation for me wasn't really playable, and I think for about the same price you can pick up a used Sony PlayStation portable Fat or Slim and get better value. Once you have the PSP modded with custom firmware, it can run emulators from the 8-bit generation to the 16-bit generation much better than the RS-97. It also has the benefit of running a huge selection of PlayStation 1 and PlayStation Portable games natively. The 4.3-inch screen is also much brighter and bigger. So that's it for this video. It's really easy to install custom firmware on your RetroGame RS-97 so it can perform better. Comment, like, share, or subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.